the ballot. You see a D/R, a piece, and that's someone who's sort of affiliated in some way anyway with more than one party. So it's super interesting. And when I'm being technically correct in Vermont, I have tripartisan, initiatives, which would be Republican, Democrat, and progressive, as opposed to bipartisan. So, yeah, it's interesting.
So you talked about knocking doors, and it looks from your Facebook page like you've been doing some other events, some tabling and things like that. Can you talk about the kinds of things that you've been doing as you've been campaigning?
Yeah, it's been really fun, actually. Like I said, this is a part of running for office that I like the most. I started knocking doors, in June, I guess. They do advise you that if you start going too early, people are going to forget about you. So over the summer, I did quite a bit of door knocking, and we are really picking up the pace now. So we're out knocking doors. We're also going to be doing some phone calls, some phone banking to let people know who I am, and especially as the election gets closer to Vermont. So there's that whole direct voter outreach thing. And, as you can imagine, that leads to some really funny stories. I mean, I had a guy, very concerned about Second Amendment rights and gun control, who was very anxious to talk to me. And so he arose from his table and came to chat with me outside, and sort of I can only describe it as like an Ebenezer Scrooge type nightshirt. And, I don't know what was on underneath. I'm thinking nothing, probably. So, you got the door knocking thing. Then you always want to be sure to hit the important street festivals or harvest festivals or fall festivals where you set up a table and hand out your stuff and, accost people as they walk by. And that was where I did mention on my Facebook page yesterday, that was where I learned there's actually a verb called tabling, which I think people made up. I don't think it's a real word, but you do hear them talking about tabling. Are you tabling this weekend? So I tabled this weekend. And then, just your basic forums and debates and, pancake suppers and all that kind of stuff. And then we're also mailing postcards and sending out, an e-newsletter. I'm trying not to spam people too much. And got a website and a Facebook page. So there are all these different ways you got to try to reach out to voters. And, you need to try to work every channel.
Are you seeing a lot of excitement from people around voting this year?
Big time. Yeah, absolutely. Especially on the Democratic side. I think people are very fired up to get out and vote. And I think that's going to translate, or I hope that's going to translate to the local level. I know people are very excited to vote nationally, but here in Vermont, I'm seeing a lot of excitement around, Democratic candidates for local offices, white offices. And for me, anyway, that's translated to a lot of enthusiasm about my campaign, which is really exciting. I mean, the fundraising has gone very well. And, I would love to flatter myself that, that's about me. But I think it's, about me, but I think it's also about people wanting to support Democratic candidates. And, we've had contributions flowing in from, college friends and people in different parts of the country. And this is for just a state house race in Vermont. So, maybe I'm optimistic, but I think the blue wave is going to be real.
And speaking of college friends, you're one of many Northwestern alumni we've spoken to on this podcast, somewhat coincidentally.
Can you believe it? I know, it's really funny. One of the first things I did when it was time to start raising money was, send out an email and a Facebook message to some of my NU friends. And, some of them stepped up big time. And it's awesome, and I think that's how this, when you think about Democrats mobilizing for these midterm elections, you think about that, the blue wave or the grassroots, whatever analogy you want to use. But I really think people are coming together all across the country, all kinds of networks to get out the vote and to support candidates. It has really been fun and sort of shocking to me to see emails and donations flow in from college friends, friends of my family. One donation came in from a guy who rode his Schwinn bicycle over and pulled me out of a tree after I climbed too high when I was about 8 years old. I don't think I've talked to him since then. But, he's a Democrat and he's supporting Democratic candidates. And, he sent me a little campaign donation from Texas. Yeah, it's fun.
If our listeners would like to help with some of those campaign donations or help in other ways, how can they do that?
Well, I think if you just Google Kathleen James for state representative, I hope my website will come right up. It should be the first thing you find. But again, my name is Kathleen James. I'm running for state rep. And if you Google Kathleen James for state representative, I would think my website would be easily found.
Excellent. We'll put a link on our website for that as well.
Super.
So, Kathleen, thanks so much for talking to me. This is really great. And as our listeners know, I love learning about other parts of the country, so I'm going to have to hit Vermont now. I've been to all the states around Vermont, but somehow missed actual Vermont. So
okay, well, you missed the best one. So Vermont is absolutely beautiful.
All right. Well, thanks so much, and we'll let you get back to your door knocking.
All right, sounds good.
I'm here in this segment with Daryl Boling, who is running for state representative in Pennsylvania in District 152. Hi, Daryl.
Hi, how are you?
Great. Thanks for joining me.
Pleasure.
So could you start just a little bit of background information about yourself and how you came to be running for state representative?
Absolutely. Well, I am certainly not someone who set out for a career in politics. I am an individual not unlike a lot of the colleagues that I've met over the last year that were lifelong Democrats, were people that were engaged, supportive of progressive policies, but coming out of the 2015-16 cycle and ultimately a result of November 9th, 2016, realized that I thought I not only had an opportunity with my background in the not-for-profit sector, in management over the last several decades, to not just try to do something to make sure that I was raising our kids in a world in which they understood the value of being civic-minded, of treating people with dignity and respect, and more importantly, getting our government prioritizing working for the people that they've been elected by. And so it also happened to align with some changes a year or so prior in the work that I was doing, which meant I wasn't working 80, 90 hours a week. And now I suddenly had time in my life to be able to campaign. So it was I'd say a meeting of the stars, but it was more of a collision of planets, I'd say, and things were happening around the globe that really led me to believe that the time was now to do something.
And so tell me a little bit about District 152. Whereabouts in Pennsylvania is this, and what does this district look like?
Sure, absolutely. The 152nd is in Montgomery County. It is just outside of Philadelphia. It is inclusive of the Moorlands, Bridnath and Hatboro, and additionally parts of Upper Dublin and even the northern tip in the Bustleton area of Philadelphia. Thank you, gerrymandering. And so it is a district that it has been over 30 years. Well, it hasn't actually had a Democrat in seat, certainly since they've had it broken out the way that it is, although it's been leaning Democratic in a number of years and even voted for Hillary +5 in 2016. So it has about 2,000 more Democrats currently, and it has picked up an additional 900 registered Democrats even since 2016. So it's a little bit of a breakdown, about 61,000 people.
And so you mentioned that's currently a Republican, and he's been in office for quite a while, I think like 11 years.
Yeah, 6 terms.
So how are people receiving your campaign? It sounds like there's probably a lot of energy for Democrats if there are that many more people registering as Democrats in the district.
There is energy for Democrats, certainly, obviously for all the reasons that I think nationally and internationally people are aware of. But there's also energy in general from both sides, from both parties, from independents alike, for people to not take for granted the individuals they believe that they were serving in their best interest on either side, and are asking questions. We know that we've been able to, once the dust was cleared, to understand there were a number of people that were Obama supporters that voted for Trump, with the larger dramatic question being a need for change, people being unhappy and feeling like they've been overlooked. And so a lot of those people are now recognizing, well, to want change is one thing, but to make sure you're doing a little diligence to understand where that's coming from is important. And so because of that, we're able to have conversations in some instances that in a few years back we might not have been able to, as we're walking around knocking on doors, because people are willing and they're receptive to somebody who, particularly given that I'm not part of the existing machine on either side, and so there's not an assumption that I'm coming in with an agenda.
And so what are some of those issues that you're talking to people about on the doors?
The first thing is speaking to why I'm running, which obviously as a parent, a father of 3 children, young children, in which not only they're K through 12, but the potential cost and the value of higher education is a huge concern, and what we are paying in our taxes and property taxes in support of education, obviously, but a number of things. And in general, where I believe we're losing out on revenue sources in our state that could be helping to offset that a little bit and relieve particularly a lot of lower to middle class income earners out there that feel like that they're not seeing relief, and they're interested in finding ways to both be able to support an educational system, to be able to make sure that their health care is being taken care of, that concerns about pre-existing conditions are huge from all demographics, whether it be the disability community or retirement age individuals or women in general. These are all things that are big, but the biggest thing that is really interesting across both parties is common sense gun legislation. We've unfortunately been allowed this conversation because things obviously came to a head in years past, Parkland being a big catalyst as we saw younger individuals, high school students, stepping forward and really holding adults accountable and making sure they realize that that literally never again we allow these kinds of things to pass without action. And so as a result of that, we're able to have conversations with Republicans, with gun owners that may previously have assumed this was a single issue, in which they realize, there are things that we can be getting done right now, and if not for a Republican majority, a lot of these things could be the law and lives could be saved.
So I noticed that in Pennsylvania, especially in your region within Pennsylvania, there's a lot of sort of cross-campaigning going on, people joining forces and working together to run. I think you were canvassing recently with Maria Collett, who was on the podcast a while ago. So can you talk a little bit about what that's been like, sort of people working together to get elected?
Well, it has been amazing, particularly for a person that does not come into this with a background and a breadth of knowledge and what the process needs to be. I mean, I do understand the nature of rallying volunteer resources. My background in the not-for-profit sector certainly prepared me for that, and about the necessity of fundraising, for similar reasons. But a lot of the inner machinations around what's necessary to fuel the machine of a campaign and to clear necessary hurdles, and the fact that everyone has been willing to a person, whether they're overlapping districts, whether they're adjacent, whether they're incumbents, to want to help each other out, because there is this larger philosophy around how a rising tide can lift all ships, and we're aware of the fact that it's about building a Democratic caucus. It's about making sure that we have a seat as a party at the table right now and are able to have some of these larger conversations, and that we know that we're in it for the long haul. We know that we expect, we're very optimistic about what can be done in this election, but we're aware that this will be paving the path for 2020 and beyond, and that if we want to make sure that we're through our processes are learning to help the next generation of first-time candidates to be able to come through and have that path cleared a little easier for them.
Yeah, I mean, from what we've been seeing in Pennsylvania, I think people who don't know Pennsylvania might be surprised to realize there is a Republican majority in the state legislature.